Hey y'all, welcome to Camille Art Gallery. I am Troy Campa, and I am co-founder and director of the gallery. And this is our first time doing a full-on live artist talk. For those that know the gallery, you know that artist talks have been very important to us since the day we founded the gallery. We've done artist talks and discussions with almost every single show, and they're critical because they give you an understanding about what the artist is trying to say or do, but it also really helps your eyes, or it helps you understand what your eyes are seeing and appreciate it better. So with the new pandemic, we're going to try something new. We're actually going to try to pre-record this and see how that goes. Bear with us because we're really not editing this video. Even though it's pre-recorded, it's only about an hour before it launches. So we're not going to have time to take out any of the glitches. So bear with us, and it should be fun. Get a drink, grab some snacks, and sit down and enjoy the talk. I did want to make a note for those that are concerned about my safety and our safety and not wearing a mask. Lee and I won't be wearing a mask during this because the audio doesn't pick up very well, but we will be staying 6 feet away. And everybody else in the room does have a mask on. So don't worry about our safety. We are taking that into consideration. And yeah, so here we go. We'll start off by, this show is Lee Albert Hill's first solo show with the gallery. We've been representing his work for a little while now, but it's the first solo show, and it's called Signs. It is up in the gallery through July 11th, and we'd love for you to come see it. It's open by appointment. But today we're going to walk through with Lee Albert Hill. So I want to introduce Lee to the gallery and to everybody with us.
Hi all.
And Lee, I'd like you to tell us a little bit about your background. We want to just start off with who you are, where you came from, and yeah, what your background's like.
Okay, well, I'm a native Texan. I grew up here. Went to Texas Tech. Moved away to Connecticut for a little while and then came back to Fort Worth. I've been there for about 23 years now. And most of that time I've been a painter. And I started painting about 20 years ago. And it took a long time to get to here, but I'm so thankful to be here, especially for all the challenges, planning the show, producing the show, and then the pandemic hit, and then getting through all those challenges. It's so nice to be here.
Great. And so with your artwork, how did it start? How did this aesthetic come to be?
I was about 10 years into painting. I started in 1999 when my kids were just born. And it was about 2010. And I wasn't getting anywhere in painting, so I just sort of put it away for a while and turned to photography. And then got a chance to go to Japan for about a week. I'm an architect by profession, and so I was part of a delegation that went to Tokyo for the AIA. It was an international business development trip, and got selected for the trip. And we went to a number of museums and saw a bunch of gardens and natural places in Japan. And I saw what some of the artists there were doing to abstract nature. And so I came back home. I said, what can I do that they were doing? And so I started painting again, but doing it by setting canvas outside and letting it weather and doing different things to it, and then bringing it into the studio and manipulating it with brush strokes and post weathering techniques. And I really didn't like where that was going, so I sat down for about 6 months and started studying hard edge painting, and a lot of artists that were doing that. One of them that comes to mind is Caio Fonseca. He's a painter in New York. Really liked his work. Cecil Touchon, he was a painter in Fort Worth. Started in Fort Worth, started in Mexico. He's now in Santa Fe. And I thought, well, what can I do sort of like they're doing? And so I remembered I did custom car work in high school, and remembered how to take things off and paint over them. So I said, I can't get this right freehand, so let's try to tape. And that's sort of how these all started. And that was about 2012.
Okay. And so you started with taping and painting the hard edges that way. And did you always start with this sort of detail work? Has that always been part of it when you started doing the hard edge, or?
Always been part of it
Okay.
since the very beginning. And I sat down and did a whole bunch of sketch work over a couple of weeks before I actually started these paintings. And those marks are really the pencil marks in the sketches.
Mm.
So I began to emulate that with tape, some sort of drawing with tape.
Right. Okay. I'm going to jump to the show for a second, and then we'll go back to your background, your thoughts on the art. But for this show, it's called Signs, and that has to do with mark making and the land. You want to talk about that a little bit, and where that idea comes from, and how that ties into your bigger body of work?
So as an architect, we're always dealing with something that's hard edge that we've got to integrate into the landscape. It's a building. The buildings are made of glass and steel, and they've become curvilinear more since computers came into it. But they're still hard edge, and it's really kind of the thoughts about integrating a hard edge building into sort of a softer landscape. And so the background in the painting is a softer landscape, and then the geometric overlay is more like the architecture. And then these things tend to break down over time. They age, they get old, they change, they get added onto, renovated. And so the line work is more sort of like an erosion of the geometry. And that's sort of the whole gist behind the work.
Got it. And with the process of the canvas, we're going to talk about the various different processes you have in a little while. But which one was first? The one that's like the ABQ series, or the one that was like the Bluestem series? Or was there something else that preceded those as far as your treatment of the canvas before you paint on it?
Bluestem came first,
Okay.
because I started in my backyard weathering painting.
So this is an example of the Bluestem series, right? And if people, if you can get a little closer look, David, on this, there's a lot of earthy elements to it. Lee, do you want to talk about that process for the Bluestem series?
So this painting started out actually purple.
Oh wow!
Bright
Okay.
purple. Like I build all my canvases and all my frames, and then this one was gessoed, and gesso's a primer, and it's a white primer. And I took it and set it out horizontally on a table outside, and then spread Bluestem grass on it. And then I took purple paint and spread the purple paint out among the grass. And then sometimes you just can't get it to rain, so I use a hose. And,
Okay.
and hose it down, get it going a little bit, kind of seed it somewhat.
Uh-huh.
And I just left it out for a week, and then the paint helps the grass stick to the canvas.
Uh-huh.
And so you come in, you bring it into the studio, you brush it off, and you've got little pieces of the grass left in it, and it's bright purple. And I knew I wanted to get to red.
Uh-huh.
I knew what purple and red would do. It'd go more blue. So I overpainted a bright pink over that, and so you get kind of little spots of pink in the painting here and here from that original overpainting of the purple, and the pink helped knock the purple down to being more subtle. And so I just built up over that, and then built up layers of reds and put sort of black and browns in the red to kind of knock it down, and then ended up with this red that's almost like blood.
Mm-hmm.
In my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And it sort of fit in the times we're going through, that we're dealing with a disease that
Mm-hmm.
affects your blood. So,
And yeah, because this is the last painting in the show, right? The newest painting.
this was produced just a few weeks before
Before we came.
yeah.
How do you decide how much of the Bluestem to leave on? Is it just a feeling, or because I know some of the paintings, like this is sort of a medium weight of Bluestem, whereas like this the white place is much lighter as far as the amount of Bluestem that's left on it. And then we've got another one back there that's Bluestem 36, 6, I think,
Very, yeah.
and it's very heavy with
Yeah,
the Bluestem.
very heavy.
So how do you make that decision?
It depends on the paint. The underpainting for this one, Bluestem 36, was much thicker. So everything stuck a lot harder into it. And it's actually orange underneath. You get a little bit of spot of orange there in the bottom left-hand corner.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what creates that sort of deeper shadow effect in the painting is the orange. And then I painted over a bright French ultramarine. And so the starting paint is much thicker on that one, and everything sticks into it. And these are all have more water applied to them, or the paint's thinner. The grass doesn't quite stick as much.
Okay. Do you ever scrape all of the Bluestem off and just start over, or is it you always just work with what you've got once it's?
I always work with what we've got, because that's kind of like approaching the landscape.
Yeah.
Sort of work with what you got.
Yeah, as most people know, I'm also an architect by trade, and I appreciate that. You know, that's one of the things I really appreciate about your work is the idea that you're working with what land gives you. Like we do as architects, we work with what nature gives us, and we build on top of it. And I've always really appreciated that element to your work, especially with the Bluestem series, because I think it's much more obvious than the Abacus series, which is this piece. Do you want to talk about how that background process is a little different?
So, where most of my work gets stretched first over a panel, and is gessoed, primered. This one takes a raw piece of canvas fabric and gets laid out on the ground loose, and then I stack rocks. Up in Abiquiu, they've got these beautiful round rocks up there because the Piedra Lumbre is a big 10-mile wide basin that used to be an ancient lake, and then the Chama River cuts through it. And so there's all these rocks out there, and I stack those on the canvas, and this little spot here, this dark spot, is where a rock was. And then I take desert grass and spread it out, and it creates these, sort of a go-by pattern later when I get the piece in my studio. And it actually starts out as black with raw canvas, black staining.
Oh, okay.
And since the canvas is loose, the paint tends to pool in these little pockets across the canvas and splash. And I roll all that, clean it off, roll it all up, bring it back to the studio, and then stretch that raw canvas over the panel, and then seal it with a clear primer, clear varnish, and then start doing the green work over that. And to get these little highlight spots in the painting here, and particularly this one, it's dripping water over the piece as it sits on the floor, just dripping water, and then you let the water sit there for a little while, and then you brush it away. You've got this mark, this drip, and I use that a lot over and over on all the paintings. Yeah, except for the ones that are poured.
Right.
Yeah.
And so with the Abacus series, you've got a whole bunch of this canvas that you created while you were in Abacus, and you're just chopping it up, cutting it up as you want to create another piece in that series with that sort of background effect.
Yeah.
So there's another one here that's a little darker, and so that's just a matter of the secondary. It's not part of the first process of it being stained on site. It's more about what you've done to it afterwards.
Correct.
Right, just creating that darker green.
Right, and I don't keep a set formula for all the paint, and there's an advantage and disadvantage to that. The disadvantage is it's hard to get one piece sort of like the other, but the advantage is that's kind of it. It makes each one unique. And this one's a little darker because the green I used was a little darker, and the yellows aren't quite as gold as some of the other paintings, but I still think that's okay.
And so all of the pieces in the show have a background or a story to them. They all are related to either a place or a person or an event. And what we've been doing over the last week or so is you had done some recordings for us telling the story of these pieces.
Right.
And David's been putting together videos of each one of the pieces.
David's great.
I know, he's fantastic. And so we've been posting those on social media. So I don't want to necessarily dive into the stories of these because we've already got those documented. And I want to make sure we keep this nice and concise. But just for everybody else to know, there are going to be either videos or still shots with stories about each one of these pieces on our social media, on our YouTube, our Facebook, our Instagram. So if you want to know more about the individual pieces, certainly dive into those. So I want to stick with process because there's so much to talk about a process, and I've gotten a few questions. I think we addressed this, but maybe you can let me know if there's anything else that you want to add to this. This is a question from one of our collectors. It is, what is your process for creating a canvas over panel painting? And so I think we talked a little bit about what you're doing with the canvas, but at what point does it stretch over the panel, and why are you doing that? And maybe talk about that a little bit.
Oh, okay. Yeah, early on I started with trying to stretch over traditional stretcher frames and having a loose canvas. And you just can't press tape into that. You know, it just presses right in.
Oh, okay.
And so I said, okay, well, let's take it off and just pin it up on the wall. But when you go to fold the canvas up around the panel, you can't get this straight alignment of the pattern around all the edges. And I like to go edge to edge and gauge the edges. So I turned to the panels, and I was like, well, I'm not going to get the panels I want. I'm going to have to make these things. So I started figuring out how to make panels. And I've been making my own panels ever since, for the whole time. Except for some pieces like this or the smaller pieces, I'll buy those panels because you know, it's easy to get a bought panel that's square and straight. It won't work. But the bigger ones take a lot more structure behind them. Early on, I had problems with working. I think if you take one of these down, they look like an architect's
They
panel.
do, and they weigh like an architect's panel.
Yeah, they're very structural. That's a disadvantage because it makes them hard to ship.
But they're sturdy.
Yeah, they're sturdy, and once you have one, or if you have one in your home, they're not going to go.
Yeah. No,
And if they
they're
do, I'll take it back.
Yeah, they're great. So let's go to the Eggs in a Basket series real quick, and these have more than just paint on them. They have to do with some weaving and elements to them. And again, we've got the story about them up on the YouTube channel. But yeah, talk about how you chose the colors you chose and what went into weaving them. I mean, that's a new thing for you, right?
Yeah, it is a new thing. And I didn't want something that was slick. And you know, with a lot of high craftsmanship in it. I wanted something, what do you call it, disassembled and sort of low craftsmanship. And I've been, you know, I'm an architect, so I'm used to really high craftsmanship in all the work that we produce. So I think you have to learn how to be a high craftsman before you can take it apart and make it rough. And so that's sort of what I've been doing with these. And they start with sort of this wad of coconut husk. It's like it looks like coconut fiber.
Okay.
Yeah. And I shape that into sort of a nest, and I'll begin to weave the string or thread in and out of the coconut husk thread. And sort of get this bowl shape, and then sort of reinforce the edge by going around and around and around the edge. And then I just go back and forth like you'd wind a string around a ball. But I'm doing it in this sort of bowl shape. So I'm just going in and out, back and forth across. And that's how to get the rough look to them.
I love how you've left the strings hanging in various different weights and things. I love that.
And I'll take the string out and run it and leave it loose. And trim it or not on the edge, and I just think that makes it engage with the painting that it's related to, and it's sort of like the bird nest.
Right, and it's mimicking all this line work that you already do anyway,
Yeah.
Sort of accentuating that.
And the painting and the nest are developed at the same time. It's not one or the other.
Oh, okay.
At the same time, but there's both a lot of thought in how this nest is engaging with a pattern in the painting.
So the other question I have another question I have from one of our collectors is, how does your training and experience in architecture influence your art? Now I know we talked about the building on the land. Is there anything else that you bring from architecture to your art?
Well, these are sort of drafted in a way. I came up at a time, I'm old enough to have had to start out as a hand draftsman in architecture.
Right.
For about 5 years before computers came on. So I've still got all that knowledge of how to hand draft things. When I start running these patterns, I draft it off on the as if it's sitting on the wall here. So I'll take it and draft it vertically, start working on it. And I've begun to leave the drafting lines in the painting so that you can see sort of how it's been put together. These little white lines here. And I think that's part of my architectural training, is how to draft big patterns like that. And then, you know, when we used to hand draft, a lot of the hand marks would still be left in the in the drawing.
Right.
And I like that look. So I think that comes into the painting a lot, my background.
Well, and I love that there's a whole bunch of signature elements that once you start looking at your work, that sort of repeat over and over, and each time it's a new presentation. So it's like an architect that has an aesthetic that's their aesthetic.
Yeah.
And you're using these elements from your architectural, memory, but you're fitting them to the particular client. And so the same thing, you're fitting these sort of language pieces into your particular piece. Your way of making these marks across the canvas, your way of making these scratch marks that, and sometimes they remind me of like a cat got after the canvas, right? It's just fun like that. It's just an earthy element to it. But then you have these structured piling of blocks or whatnot. And in different pieces, they represent different things.
Correct.
Right? Sometimes they're representing something really minute, and sometimes they're representing really big elements. But there's just this repeat of language to use to tell your stories about your pieces.
That's right. This one is the White Place. So the White Place is an actual place in Abiquiu, and it's a sort of a series of canyons with a bunch of hoodoos, for lack of not knowing what else they are, but they all stick up like little fingers out of the desert, and they're white. And in some light they're gray. This is sort of an early morning or late afternoon version. And those little hoodoos have these tops on them that they look like little hats, and they've just worn that way over the years. And so these blocks are an attempt to kind of create the openings and the little hoodoos that are there. And that canyon has been in so many different movies. I think the new Lone Ranger that came out about 10 years ago, a lot of it was filmed in the White Place.
Okay.
And then a number of science fiction movies have been filmed there because it's so otherworldly. But I just love the place. George O'Keeffe painted it, and I wanted to paint it, and this was my version.
And so I also noticed when we're talking about elements in your paintings, that in several of the paintings there is a glimmer to them. The Glacier 2 has it, the Elsinore has it. Talk about the idea or the thought behind putting that in, and how does that change your process, or how is that integral to your process?
So a painting like this is not weathered. It's all built up in the studio. And I'll take, in the background, I'll start out by pouring sort of these, these little round shapes that are in the painting, and these drips and runs. It's sort of hard if you don't have, scraping light to see. There's a lot of run work in it. And that starts out first on the raw canvas, and it's sort of like pancake batter. My kids call them pancakes. My daughter's nodding back there. And then I'll just start pouring paint over all that, and just pour after pour after pour. You know, there might be 100 pours in this painting, and then I'll let it rest, put it on the wall, and then I'll take a varnish that's got glitter in it and apply that over all that.
Oh, okay.
And I started using glitter after I saw there's another painter in New York. Her name is Carrie Moyer. Carrie's work is just a flamboyant expression of, you know, dozens of different paint techniques in a painting. And she uses a lot of glitter. And so I thought, well, that looks really neat. I want to try something like that. So I started using glitter. And then this painting, it just seemed to go with ice.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's ended up being a glacier painting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the process is the same for this Elsinore piece too? The glitter sort of came on after you did that back base, you did that wash over it, right?
Yeah. Same process. The glitter is a little different. This is a gold glitter, and the one in the glacier piece is like a silver blue glitter. So there's different types of glitter you can use.
I love how this one represents, you had said in your story, it represents the granite.
Yeah.
And I think in real life, I don't know how it shows up on camera, but in real life, it really, really captures that feel of just a light sparkle in the granite, nothing overwhelming, it's just a subtle.
Yeah, I went for a real subtle look on that. I'd really like to do the big one that looks like a piece of granite.
Let's go for it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we're going to have to wrap up soon. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about related to the show, or anything about your work that you want to make sure that everybody knows about? Or?
I just really appreciate this opportunity, and I thank you, Troy, from the bottom of my heart.
Absolutely.
For putting all this together. I know how much work it was. It was a lot of work on my end too.
Yeah.
But it must have been so much more work. Veronica's been great. Absolutely outstanding to work with. And the gallery's been really good to me. And come out and see the show, and buy some work. And as I say on the last tire, go see some art.
Go see some art. There you go. I also want to just make a note that, as I mentioned, all of those little mini stories are up on YouTube and Instagram and Facebook. And we will be posting this video on our website as well as the social media channels, so you can share it in all those different ways if you want to share this video with people. We will be posting a few more stories. We haven't got all of them out yet, so watch for those over the next couple of days. There's a few more pieces that have stories to them that we haven't posted. And the show ends July 11th. Yes, July 11th. We do appointments. There's a link on our website where you can make an appointment to come to the gallery. You'll have the gallery entirely to yourself, so you don't have to worry about interacting with other people. And yes, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the talk.